And good evening and welcome again to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast with you as always, Jeffri Chadiha from the NFL Network, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star. I'm Soren Petro saying thanks for talking some Chiefs football with us. If you catch us via the podcast, remember we stream live usually on Tuesday nights, 8:30, 9:30 is when we record the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. We're talking defense. We went offense in the last edition of the Red, Gold, and Bold. We're reviewing the 23 defense, looking ahead to the 24 defense. Can they be as good as they were last year? Number two, overall, the ranking last year. Can they duplicate that? Does Chris Jones maintain his level of play, or does a big fat contract maybe make it a little bit easier for him to take a little bit of time off? Does he get better because now he'll be at training camp? Can Michael Danna live up to his new contract? Will the Chiefs miss Willie Gay Jr.? Will they miss the depth they had at linebacker? How much is on Leo Chenal to step up and be an every down linebacker? How do the Chiefs replace L'Jarius Sneed? They have that answer in-house. And does the three-peat ride on the defense performing at the same level it did last year? We talk about it right now on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You are listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeffri Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro. Jeffri Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell is the sports columnist for the Kansas City Star. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Best Chiefs podcast, Jeffri Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro.
And thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. Talking some defense in this edition of the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. Outstanding it was last year, Jeff. Number two overall when it came to yards allowed. And obviously, as we know, they needed it. They really needed it in the second half against the Baltimore Ravens in the AFC Championship game. We didn't think the defense was going to be that good, right? We all thought the defense would be improved. And, just how good was it really? Like, was it, do we not even give it enough credit when you consider some of the problems they had on the offensive side of the ball?
Well, look, I always try to remind people that I think Eric and I were both on the record when they started putting this group together as saying there was a lot of potential to it. I know people always try to peg me as a Chiefs hater, but go back and check those early podcasts and you'll see those comments being made. So certainly not expecting them to be whatever top two in the league, but they were everything you'd want a defense to be for a championship team, which was they were reliable, they were dynamic, they stepped up their game in the playoffs, they started turning people over. They weren't a huge takeaway team before that point, and all of a sudden they were getting huge takeaways in the postseason. So they did everything that they had to do. But again, yeah, it's to go ahead and duplicate that for a second straight year will be a challenge because they are missing a few pieces. People are more aware of what you can do. I do think that there might have been some teams underestimating what they could be and kind of being surprised by their ability to step it up because the Chiefs have been so dominant offensively and so reliant on Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce over the years through this dynastic run. But yeah, I think that they're going to be good. We'll see if they are as good as they were last year. I think it's going to be more of a challenge to be at that level again.
Sam, what do you think of last year's defense? Was it just kind of one of those perfect storms? Everything came together. They had perfect chemistry, and it's going to be difficult to repeat that? Or do you think it's something that, no, hey, they have the ingredients. Most of those ingredients are back. They should be able to be pretty close to that.
Yeah, I mean, their defense, I agree with Jeff. Like, there was some underrated aspects to it, which is Like when you don't turn teams over that much and still are that effective defensively, like that's really tough to do. From a yards per play basis, they were as good as they had been in like 27 years. So that like they were generationally good for this franchise last year. Having said that, I think I attribute that to like one primary reason, which is they were really versatile. And you can be versatile for a couple of different reasons, which is one, your personnel knew Steve Spagnuolo's system like they had never known it before because they're guys, a lot of those players, Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson, Justin Reed, guys that hadn't played in the system the first year, and Trent McDuffie in his second year as well. Those were guys in their second year of a complicated defense. That really helped. The other reason I thought they were versatile, though, is because they had depth. They could play multiple cornerbacks if Josh Williams was struggling, or if they needed a bigger guy out there, it was Josh Williams, or it was Jalen Watson. It wasn't usually both. And the same happened at linebacker, which I know we'll get to. But you had 4 linebackers who were starting caliber players last year in the NFL, and you got to pick and choose your own packages of when to insert them. And so that's going to be the major question for the Chiefs this year is, do they lose that element of the versatility, even if the guys remaining do still have that same comprehension of Steve Spagnuolo's defense?
I do believe that there's kind of a chemistry thing, Jeff. Like you get things going, and it just kind of keep going. They got that, right? Like there was confidence building up to it. And once it got rolling, there was no stopping them, right? Nobody ever did really. I'm not forgetting a game where somebody just blew them up and they had a really bad day, did I? It was always the offense that
Green Bay gave them some problems. I remember that one. And I think the Raiders ran all over them. I remember that too.
I'm looking here from a point total. I was at the Packer game and it did suck. 27-19, gave up 27 points. And that was the highest point total of the year. Only gave up more than 20, gave up 21 to the Lions, gave up 24 to the Broncos. And I think the offense had a pick 6 in that one. So I think they really gave up 17. Gave up 24 to the Bills in a win. I mean, it was a pretty steady effort across the board. I mean,
yeah, but they also played a different style of football too. I think Sam mentioned that in the last podcast in terms of they weren't trying to go out there and hang 35 points on everybody they played against. They were able to play to their defense. And so the games became more possession battles. But, really, I think the thing that I'm curious to see if offenses are willing to do this year, because this is where teams had success against them last year, and it went away in the playoffs to a certain extent. I mean, you got to run the ball against them. That's how Green Bay beat them. That's how the Bills beat them. That's the Bills had the time possession in that playoff game was 37 minutes they had the ball. I mean, it's crazy. And if the Ravens had run the football, they probably would have beat them too. But teams, for whatever reason, this defense was phenomenal at not giving people second opportunities and third opportunities to really take advantage of them. They really didn't make a lot of mental mistakes. They really were very good, as you said, in situations where, especially in the Super Bowl against San Francisco, with calling the right blitz, Chris Jones making a play at the right time. They were just so clutch in those moments that if they're able to repeat that, they'll be tough. But again, I think that the teams that had success against them offensively, against their defense with their offense, was teams that could run the football.
Yeah, I mean, and look, they did re-sign Mike Pennell, as opposed to being a midseason addition, which he's been on 2 different occasions for this team. They seem to like what he's given him. He should be there from the beginning. Chris Jones should be there from the beginning, Sam. He signs a big contract, which means to get paid, he's got to show up at camp. He'll be at all at training camp. Good, bad, indifferent on what a highly paid and in training camp Chris Jones means for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we're going to see like a major drop-off just because he has got his paycheck. I mean, this is his second payday post-draft. It's not his first, but, he was better in 2022 than he was in 2023. I mean, last year, I don't think we saw peak Chris Jones in the way we did 2023. And look, that's a compliment to him. He was still second among interior defensive linemen in total pressures last year. He was first by a pretty wide margin the year before. But, Chris Jones brings a value beyond his own production, which is he leads the league in double teams every year. On almost 3/4 of his snaps last year, he was double teamed. And when you look at the individual battles among the Chiefs' defensive line, the Mike Dannas, the George Karloftises, they have to win one-on-one. Chris Jones has to win 2-on-1. And there's a value in that, even that, to be honest, will outlast his own production. Whenever we do see the fall off with Chris Jones, whether it's at age 30, 31, 32, or beyond, teams will be late to realize it. And therefore, they'll still give him that sort of attention that will allow some benefit to the rest of the group on the line.
I think one of the things that would help is, and George Karloftis took another step. He took a step in season in year one. He took a step for year two. But the continued growth of George Karloftis, I think, makes it tougher to double team Chris Jones and gives him more opportunity to work one-on-one. I think that's one of the things that will be big. And I also think Mike Pennel, just as a pocket collapser, I think that's one of the things, I think they want him for his run. But when they throw on early downs, I think they found their group of, guys they want around him to maximize Chris Jones. I mean, I do think that is one of the reasons why they kept this group together. I think we're all honest. FAU didn't do much. And the idea that you can just hand it to him and move on was part of it. I know we're going to talk about Michael Danna as well. But for Chris Jones, I do think they like the combination of people they've got around Chris Jones. I think Sam's right. It starts with Chris Jones. There is young players around him, not Pennel, but Karloftis and FAU. If they get better, then Chris Jones gets less attention. Like that could make Chris Jones better if just the guys around him will be better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you are really I think you're a lot higher on Mike Pennel than I am. He joined them like week 15. He was out of work till the first 3.5 months of the season. I don't know. I mean, I think the bar for Mike Pennel is he can beat out Derek Nottie, because I think a lot of people can beat out Derek Nottie. But look, I mean, Jeff mentioned it, like their run defense is still an issue. Like they didn't solve that this offseason by bringing back a guy that was on their practice squad for the majority of last year. And as much as like the storyline of the Chiefs offense for these past 2 seasons are like, can they be patient enough and nickel and dime their way down the field in the passing game? Like that's the question for opposing teams against the Chiefs too, is can they be patient enough to stick with their run game even when it gets 2 yards on first down? Jeff, are you the Mike Pennel hater that Sam is?
Yeah, I didn't know you were still on the team. I'm not my hater. I'm like more like what's that?
That wasn't the lead story on NFL
ignorant
when he re-signed?
Yeah,
Mike Pennel, I'll stick up for Mike Pennel. Mike Pennel makes plays.
He does. Mike Pennell's a solid player. I mean, he's a one-dimensional player. He's good at that one dimension. But I think
Mike Pennel brings out the best in Chris Jones. I think Derek Nottie is a problem. I do not get that fascination whatsoever. Not to be the, Eric Eager of beating down on Nottie. I think he has a moment here or there, but Mike Pennel is significantly better, just taking up space. I mean, I think there is an element. Like I know you Jeff, when we were talking up in the offensive breakdown in the last podcast, we're talking about how they do different things with guys on the inside. There is still a value to being able to take up 2 blocks. Like, and Mike Pennel does that. He is a massive individual that at least gets back into the backfield at times. And there is value in that. Not everybody's Chris Jones.
Yeah, so why is he on the opening day roster then?
Get that.
You're in a practice squad.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Why is Derek Nottie on the roster at all? I don't know. Why is Kadarius Toney on this roster? Listen, if you ask me to like that they've got it all figured out. No, there are things that I don't understand what they're doing.
I like Mike Pennel, but do you know how many tackles he had last year? And I'll put the over-under at 3.5. It's under.
I was going to say 3.
He's not a linebacker, and he wasn't on the team for all the year. Okay, on the active roster.
He did play 3 games. I mean, he was there.
Again, do you know why Kadarius Toney plays? Because I don't. So if the answer is whatever the Chiefs do is the right answer and is infallible, well, then we need to stop doing this podcast.
The rest of the league could have signed Mike Pennel. He was on the practice squad. Like, he was available for anybody in the league to sign last year.
There it is. It's over. I win. Tommy says Mike Pennel made plays.
That's what he actually plays. That's what it's like.
Well, and
he's not playing. He's not
listen.
October, November.
I do think part of it is I don't know that the guy wanted to play early in the year. right? But they recognize they need him, and
like
every time
money.
they've gone and gotten him, he plays well. Listen. We don't need to spend an entire podcast talking Mike Pennell, but I think he is. I'm glad he's back, because if they just came back with Derek Nottie, that would really be a problem, because he's on roller skates. But I do think they have a chance to be as good. Listen, it's the same group up front. Do we think the defensive line is going to be better, worse, or the same? Let's put it that way.
I think it'll be the same. I look at it like, I'm not trying to minimize their championship run. I know people might hear this, but I like, if Joe Burrow's playing late in the year, if the Chargers aren't a mess, they're going to see a lot better quarterback play this year than what they saw last year. And I think that's a big factor in this as well. You're going to see coaches who are going to have a more reliable game plan against them. And I feel like, to answer the question about Chris Jones, I think he will continue to play at a high level. I do think money influenced how hard he played in the past. When he was up for extensions, he had bigger years. I feel like now he's in the legacy portion of his career and more concerned about how he's going to be remembered. And he knows he's got his last big payday, so that's not going to be as much of a factor. But I feel like, Dana and Karlaftis aren't as much a factor in getting him free as just the blitz packages. I mean, you see a lot of things that they do. You see Justin Reed coming off of the middle. You'll see L'Jarius Sneed and McDuffie coming off the edge. That opens up opportunities for him as well. In fact, that last play he made in the Super Bowl, when he pressured Brock Purdy, that was Justin Reed coming on a blitz that opened it up for him to get free. And so I think they're very creative in what they do, which again goes back to our teams willing to run them out of opportunities to get into those blitz packages, because that is also a big factor in whether they can actually pressure teams and really dominate teams up front.
Same, better, worse? What do you think of the defensive line, Sam?
I think it's about the same. But I mean, look, FAU is the guy that could change that if this offseason training with Tom Ali makes an actual difference. The thing about FAU that's confounding to me is, just because he's not a first-round pick level player doesn't mean he can't be a third-round pick level player. Like, you'll take that out of him this year. But I do think the Chiefs being second in the NFL in stats was one of the most misleading stats last year, because it implies that their defensive line was good. And that's not where they were winning outside of Chris Jones. They were winning because their blitz packages were so extravagant that teams hadn't seen a lot of it, and it was tough to prepare for in a week's time.
Yeah, but let me be clear. On a blitz, and Jeff, you know this, on a blitz, the rest of the defensive line doesn't just sit down and watch a linebacker or safety come running in there. There are responsibilities, and that's part of what that's part of what blitzing coordinators do, is the D-line sometimes is acting as, basically a blocker, creating the gaps to open up for the guy to run free and get there. So, I do think there are things that are asked of this defensive line. I agree. This is not, Buddy Ryan's Eagles front, okay, or the 85 Bears with just all these great pass rushers up there. But I think there are guys that know their role and do it and execute it well. I don't think there's any way it's worse. I think Karlaftis still has ceiling. I think he was a raw player when he came in. FAU still has ceiling. I think Michael Danna is kind of a finished product, and we can talk about him here in a second. By the way, we're brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. You know that every project that Gann does comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt and Concrete keeps your parking lot safer, helps your business avoid unnecessary delays, costly expenses. You don't need them, you don't have to deal with them. Gann Asphalt and Concrete's been solving parking lot issues since 1994. That's 30 plus years. Find them online right now at GannAsphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lot. That's Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Let's talk a little bit about Michael Danna, right? Like, what do you see from Michael Danna this year, Jeff? Do you see a guy? Now, remember, he put up a bunch of stats early, then we didn't see as much. That's also when Charles Omenihu came back and he didn't play as much. What are your expectations for Michael Danna now that he got paid?
Well, one, I give him a ton of credit for making the most of his opportunity. I always say that I watch a lot of Michigan football. I have no recollection of Mike Danna ever putting on a Wolverine uniform or playing. I know he was there for a year. Can't remember the guy at all. So what he's done with his career, what he's been able to do this past year is phenomenal. And I think he's more of what he showed last year. I think he's the kind of guy who probably have, fits and starts. He'll have bursts. I don't see him as being somebody who's ever going to be a double-digit sack guy. I feel as if he's in this position, one, because of Amenahue, obviously, but I think, if FAU was making great strides, he wouldn't have that contract, and he'd be someplace else. And so just as, we talked in the last podcast about Hollywood Brown not getting, a lot of run outside of the Chiefs, it was the money he got from the Chiefs. Clearly, he wasn't getting that from anybody else because they signed him later in free agency. And I think about a guy that the Washington Commanders signed from Dallas, Dorrance Armstrong, who was playing behind Michael Parsons and the other guy down there. I forget the other edge rusher. What's his name?
Lawrence.
Yeah, DeMarcus Lawrence. That guy had 7.5 sacks and got like a $40 million deal from the Commanders. So I don't put him in that category, but I like I think he fits well into what they like to do because you can move him around. He can have success in one-on-ones, and he kind of, he's kind of filling a big need right now.
Yeah. Listen, it's clear that they're not sure about what they're going to get from FAU. We all agree with that if they knew they had hell on wheels there, they'd be moving on. But it is nice. He's not breaking the bank. Nope. And it is nice to have the depth because that's one thing they like to do is rotate the defensive lineman in there. And I think he does give them the chance to be better on the defensive line because without him, somebody else had to make up everything he did.
Yep.
Right. And then there's the Amenahue piece. If he can come back late with fresh legs and add that into a playoff run, that gives him a chance to really, I think, take another step.
Yeah, I mean, Mike Danna entered free agency at the right time in his career, and we're getting ready to talk about a guy who was the opposite and a linebacker. But I mean, he had 31 stops last year during the regular season, and that was almost twice as many as he'd had in any season of his career. He had more pressures than he'd had in any season of his career. But the one other element here is, Jeff mentioned that it's a sign that, other teams weren't offering maybe what the Chiefs were willing to pay. I think that's not necessarily the case. I think there was likely some, hey, we want to work you in. We're going to wait to see how much of Patrick Mahomes' contract we need to push forward. There is a plan for you. Having said that, nobody wowed him, right? Or that plan goes to hell anyway. Yeah. But the reason I think he's a better fit for the Chiefs than a lot of teams is because he can rush from the inside. Yeah. Even if he is a defensive end who can set the edge, he's not terrible against the run. He's not terrible as a pass rusher. Like, he's got a pretty high floor. And if he can also move that inside when you've got a guy making $95 million guaranteed over the next 3 years that wants to kick out to the outside occasionally, it's a pretty good guy to have in that rotation.
I would agree. And I think the defensive line will be fine. It will be better because I think George Karlaftis takes another step, as I said. Let's talk about the linebacking core. They were 4 deep. They needed all 4 because they had some injuries. Drew Tranquill was able to step in and play the middle linebacker spot when Nick Bolton went down. They had that depth. Leo Chenal could step in. Now they lose Willie Gay Jr. Let's start with Willie Gay. Will the Chiefs miss Willie Gay, Jeff?
They'll miss some things. I wasn't the biggest Willie Gay fan, and when they got Drew Tranquill last year, I thought he was a better player, and that bore out given what they paid him. They let Willie walk, but Willie was athletic. He was fast. He could cover, and there is when you could bring that dimension in and rely upon it. To not have that, there will be some moments where they will miss it. I love what Leo Chenal did in the Super Bowl. He's obviously did some things that no one saw coming. I think over the course of 17 games, now obviously they're not going to play 3 linebackers, for a long period of time for most games, but he fits in as a run stopper, as a guy who can put his hand on the ground sometimes, who can blitz. But now you got one guy who can cover in that group consistently. That's Tranquill. And I think that's going to be that's going to create some challenges for them against teams that actually have running backs who can get out and move around. The Joe Mixons, obviously, if J.K. Dobbins can stay healthy for the Chargers, you're talking about whatever the Ravens are going to throw at you. the Bengals will have players like that. Christian McCaffrey, those kinds of players could cause you some problems.
Yeah, where do you sit on Willie Gay and what the Chiefs will miss, Sam?
Yeah, I think they already missed him last year because he took such a big dip last year in his coverage ability. He was their coverage linebacker in 2022 and just fell off a cliff with his coverage ability last year. Like, if you'd asked this question after 2022, we would not have said that Willie Gay would be signing a one-year deal coming out of free agency. He just his career was on a trajectory that he took a step back a year ago, but I think the Willie Gay question is actually the indicative of the big picture question with the Chiefs defense, which is last offseason, what they did was they had contingency plans at every level. And this offseason, they peeled back those contingency plans. If a linebacker gets hurt, I don't know who plays. They had Mike Edwards at safety last year when Brian Cook went down. I'm not exactly sure who plays at safety this year. Aminu, who's hurt on the defensive line this year. So that is one body that we don't know how long he's going to be out. They're down L'Jarius Sneed, right, at cornerback. So that's one more body at cornerback that they're out. So the depth that this team built last year that I thought was the strength of their defense was guy goes down. It truly was next man up. Everyone uses the cliche. The Chiefs made their offseason a year ago about fulfilling that cliche. This year, that, like I said, it's been a little bit of the opposite. And so they go into the season with more of a you got to stay healthy mentality than I think they did a year earlier.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the depth has been robbed. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We'll get into the secondary in a minute. And I think they are three deep at linebacker. And I think you can get there. I think you can get to the finish line with three. But I think they're pretty versatile, right? I do like the three linebackers. And, Jeff, I would take slight issue. I think Nick Bolton is a better coverage linebacker than he's given credit for. I think he's a thumper. He does all those things, and he doesn't get the credit. And he didn't come out with a bunch of, I always thought Ray Lewis was somewhat overrated in coverage. He was good, very good, but people acted like Deion Sanders was, covering at times. But he came with all this hype and, what he was coming out of Miami, and that just kind of just built. When he made big plays, it was like, look at Ray Lewis, he's a beast. And when he missed a play, or when Will Shields or Brian Waters mauled him or something, it was like, well, just got poo-pooed away because everybody was justifying their pick. Nick Bolton came to the Kansas City Chiefs with no fanfare, right? Other than Mizzou fans and maybe, local football fans. But nationally, nobody knew who the hell Nick Bolton was. And I think he's had to earn everything. I think he is a better linebacker. Eric and I always fought about this. He always tried to call him Tracy Simeon. I think he is a fantastic linebacker. I think they clearly love the way he lines people up. And I think he is grossly underrated as a cover. I'm not saying he's the best coverage linebacker, but I don't think he's a liability from the middle linebacker spot at all when he has to cover.
I think he's a liability. I mean, hey, they drop him in zone a lot. When I haven't watched all the tape of him play, but I've never seen him take anybody one-on-one and wow me with his coverage ability. But that doesn't mean, again, not most middle linebackers aren't great coverage guys. There are very few guys out there who are off-ball linebackers, if you like a Roquan Smith, Fred Warner type guys. Most guys can't do that. So it's not like I'm isolating him and trying to call him out for that. I think it's just not his strength.
Sam, you're a giant Mizzou homer. Where do you sit? That's not true at all. If you didn't know Sam went to Mizzou,
Sam's a Michigan fan. You should know that right now. We're going to out him. He's a Wolverine fan.
Yes. But how do you gauge Nick Bolton's abilities?
I mean, I think this is one where we can take our cues from the Chiefs. Like, they set him out on third downs a lot last year and put in Drew Tranquill for him, even when he was healthy. And we saw before that Nick Bolton was a 100% of the snaps kind of player a year ago. And that's not 2 years ago in 22. And that's not what he was.
They had the depth. That's my point. So this is what I'm asking. I'm sorry. Let me clarify. Agreed. When you have Drew Tranquill, you can put him there. And they still have him. I think they'll still do that at times. But if Nick Bolton has to stay on the field, I don't think he's a middle linebacker. To Jeff's point, the way Jeff just clarified it, no, he's not a great coverage linebacker. But as a middle linebacker, I don't think he's a liability if your middle linebacker's on the field and has to cover somebody compared to other middle linebackers.
I think if Drew Tranquill goes down next year, other teams' game plan is going to be thrown to the running backs and tight ends a lot. because they don't have a guy who can cover at linebacker. And like you mentioned, I mean, it's not the primary reason that a lot of these linebackers are on the field in the beginning, but teams will expose that next year because he was the guy covering. We even had a comment about, name the play that Willie Gay screwed up in. I'd counter that by saying, name the play where he excelled in coverage last year. He had 1 interception last year. He was targeted over 50 times. He had 1 interception, 0 pass breakups was Willie Gay's stats. He had a lot of opportunities to make a play in coverage. He made 1. Nick Bolton made 3. And Nick Bolton was targeted less, to your point, Soren. But look, I mean, I think teams look at that matchup with Nick Bolton. If they have a guy that can get out in space, they like that matchup.
James Cook in that same category. I think you'll see teams like that definitely when they're in base personnel try to go after him. They did last year. James Cook caught that first touchdown pass against Buffalo, and I was a zone, but he zipped right past him.
Yeah, I do think Leo Chenal needs to be used the right way, but if he is used the right way, I think he's a weapon. Right? I don't think you want him covering James Cook either, but I don't think you put him on the field in situations that you think he's going to have to cover James Cook. But I think he is a north-south linebacker that can cause a lot of havoc. And I think his play late in the season and in the postseason showed he's a better all-around linebacker than given credit for.
Yeah, I do think this latest comment is a good one, Stern, if you want to put that on there. Like, Jaden Hicks was drafted as a safety who can play in the box.
Right.
And last year, Shamari Connor was drafted as a safety, and it was actually the Chiefs' most puzzling pick of the draft. It turns out the guy can play slot cornerback. And so I think Jaden Hicks could be a factor in the mix, totally depending on how the next 3 months go, right? But I don't think that's not out of their mind that Jaden Hicks could be part of the solution for a guy that can cover and still can be productive enough if they surprise you with a draw play.
Well, let's talk about that. Is that how they cover up the problem at linebacker, Jeff? Is their depth in the secondary? We can get into L'Jarius Sneed and how they're going to replace him. Brian Cook comes back from injury. That is a question mark. How well will he come back? Because his injury was later in the year as well. So that's something that remains to be seen. I'm with you. Mike Edwards was fantastic. I mean, I hated to see Mike Edwards go. I thought that was one of the most underrated signings, and kudos to Brett Beach and his staff for signing Mike. And by the way, kudos to Jeffri Chadiha, who immediately jumped on that. That was one of your first ones about how much you thought that was a really good signing. For those, again, that think Jeff's a Chiefs hater, you immediately were beating the drum for him last year. I don't like seeing him go either. I'm with you 100% on that. But I do like that mix because Shamari Connor, to Sam's point, proved to be a very versatile player. I do think that, and everybody loved the pick of Hicks, assuming that's right. Everyone I talked to that knows him loves him. And I don't think Deion Bush blows. I know he didn't get out there much, and he's mostly just there for special teams. But I think there's a little bit more there at the safety spot. And we haven't mentioned Justin Reed, who starts. I think maybe that is the answer. More safeties is how they're going to pick up for Willie Gay's absence.
Yeah, no, yeah. Spags loves those big nickel packages, the 3 safety looks, and as Sam said, like just the versatility that you get with that, just moving guys around, creating different looks. All offenses are built off personnel, and so they're looking to see who you put out there on the field, and you have a lot of guys who are similar size with different skill sets coming from different angles. It does make it tough. I say this every year. Like, most quarterback pressures don't come from great players; they come from confusion. And so when you can have quarterbacks out there and offensive linemen trying to figure out, who's coming, who's not coming, who's dropping, who's doing what, all that stuff helps. Now, it does help when you got 2 guys who can play man coverage on the outside, take away people, and you don't have to worry about helping with them. And so you had a lot more freedom for those safeties for Spagnuolo to do different things with them. And so that is kind of the big question here. We'll get into it, obviously, with L'Jarius Sneed being gone, is can they find somebody who can be close to what he was on the other side of Trent McDuffie? Because if they don't, then it affects him too, as far as how effective he can be and what kind of role he can have in the defense this year.
Sam, you want to take first shot at that? What do you think the plan is for replacing L'Jarius Sneed?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you're going to see McDuffie, I think, play full-time on the outside. Last year, he played 60% of his snaps as a slot cornerback. I think Trent McDuffie could make that move, but like I don't think L'Jarius Sneed could replicate what L'Jarius Sneed did last year. So no, I mean they're not going to replace what L'Jarius Sneed was a year ago. McDuffie's a really good player. I think we all think Trent McDuffie's a good player, but there's a question about, first of all, if like Jalen, there's going to be snaps where Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams have to play. We've seen those guys have peaks and valleys throughout their first 2 seasons. But I do think that the answer could be Shamari Connors. And there's been a lot of talk about him as a safety, a third safety in those dime packages. I just see him lining up as a slot cornerback more than I do as a safety. And look, he was really good in spot play as a rookie last year. And a bigger role, I think, look, it's definitely a question, but he's a bigger guy that can play on the inside. And I think he's quick enough to do it. He's also a guy that is definitely not afraid to mix it up in the running game, which you have. That's a requirement of the guys who play on the inside. So that's how I envision the Chiefs at least opening training camp with, and probably the season as well.
Were you buying the Najee Johnson hype last year? The 7th round pick from 2 years ago, who people were saying had passed Watson, had passed Josh Williams. Were you buying that hype?
Yeah, I mean, he hadn't camp, right? But look, Juan Thornhill was running with the threes like 2 years ago in camp, and like the first 2 weeks of camp. So, yeah, I mean that they were in the you have a great day. Let's teach some players some lessons that you need to get up to this level. Still of that stage of training camp. I still would have been surprised if Najee Johnson had started in week 1 of the season just because he was rolling out with the ones in like late July. Having said that, 7th round pick, they were getting more out of Najee Johnson than I think they anticipated going into camp last year. He's missed an entire season. He spent a lot of the previous year on the practice squad. So there's just not a lot of reps there to go into saying we're comfortable because Najee Johnson's on the roster. I think the better way to view Najee Johnson is you've got this guy on a roster. What a great bonus it is that he's a depth piece instead of a guy you are counting on right off the bat.
Yeah. Jeff, group effort? Or do you think there's one guy that takes L'Jarius Sneed's spot?
Oh, group effort, and really the entire group. Again, it's such a. I can't think of too many cornerback combinations in the last few years. I mean, they got a pretty good one in Cleveland with Denzel Ward and Greg Newsome. It's just hard. Dallas will have a good one when they get Trayvon Diggs back and the kid who filled in for him down there. But I think overall, it's hard to get 2 corners who can be very good on islands and take people away. And when you can do that, when you take away 2 receivers from an offense, it's hard to have anybody else really kill you. And so that is, I think they'll roll coverage more. I think they'll probably have to figure out matchup wise how they want to defend certain team, because you really looked at it's such a their schedule is tough. Obviously, we all know that. We've talked about it before, but just the diversity of offenses they're going to see, from the Ravens to the Bengals, the Niners to the Texans, the Chargers will throw different stuff at them with Harbaugh with the run game. It's Cleveland has got a lot of different receivers. I know it's Deshaun Watson still got to figure some stuff out. So I think it's a lot of different looks they're going to get. And so it's not going to be just, okay, line up you 2 guys, McDuffie, whoever else, take your guys, and we'll figure out the rest. It's going to be a lot of group effort, as you said.
Yeah, the overall depth is going to have to carry the day. But that's what coverage is, right? That's one of the things our buddy Eric Eager said for a long time. It's about no weaknesses. Yeah. Right? That's the question. Do you see a weakness, Sam, in what that D backfield is going to be right now? Do you see a spot where it's like, oh, God, if this guy's out there, this is where they're going to pick?
Yeah, not to that level, but look, I think there's spots where the Chiefs are going to have to help more than they did last year. I think the safeties roles are going to have to change a little bit from what they did last year. And one of the things that Steve Spagnuolo was really good at was disguising coverages as well. It wasn't just disguising blitzes. I mean, I still remember a couple plays in the divisional round against the Dolphins where he's got Trent McDuffie playing safety, lining up on the line of scrimmage and dropping back and playing safety. That's not really what teams game plan for, is to see the slot cornerback playing safety. So they can be creative. And the one thing that Steve Spagnuolo and Dave Merritt do literally as well as anybody in the business is make cornerbacks. And I think they'll find matchup situations. But to Jeff's point, like, you're not going to see a guy, I think, take away a third of the field the way that L'Jarius Sneed did a year ago. The combination of L'Jarius Sneed and Trent McDuffie could do.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I will say this. I'll go back to something, Sam, you said that L'Jarius Sneed couldn't duplicate what he did last year. I think he played great, but part of it, corners get beat. He got beat in the playoffs, right? It happens. And I think part of it, that giving up no touchdowns was somewhat anomaly, right? Like it just doesn't happen. Dion got beat, okay? Rod Woodson got beat. It happens. And so I think in some ways we built the L'Jarius Sneed and what's needing to be replaced, maybe not us three, but I think the Chiefs world has built him into this, oh my God. I mean, they definitely had built him into this. How will you live without him? When we would talk, I remember last year, we're like, he's not going to be there. Like, we're pretty confident he's not going to be there. And I think the fan base was like, my God, there's no life after L'Jarius Sneed. He was very good. I'm not speaking ill of him, but he was not infallible. I think there was a little bit of luck. Very good player, plus some luck, gave what was a statistically phenomenal season. But you watch, without all the bells and whistles that Steve Spagnuolo throws out there, I guarantee you there's probably going to be a story written, what's wrong with L'Jarius Sneed? That's coming. Because when you pay that kind of money for a guy, what the Titans are going to do is go island, one-on-one, travel, and we'll do everything else over here. And I don't know that he's ready to do that. Do you think that, Jeff?
Yeah, that's kind of like, remember, who's it, Byron Maxwell with the Seahawks back when he got that big deal to go play for, I think, went to the Eagles. And all of a sudden he was in Philadelphia and they're playing different style of coverage. And they thought, oh, go over there and take this guy man to man. And no Richard Sherman, no Cam Chancellor, no Earl Thomas. And it was like, he didn't make much. He didn't live up to the contract.
J.C. Jackson's the same way, Jeff.
Yep. Same thing. So, yeah, a lot of it is they do a lot of stuff technique-wise in Kansas City, and obviously they're known for being very handsy and very physical, and that you get in the wrong system with the wrong supporting cast around you, you can get exposed pretty quickly. But I also feel like a lot of L'Jarius Sneed, what built him up was I do think teams didn't think he was as good as he ended up playing, and so they kept going after him. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. If teams are willing to actually be more methodical and more exacting in how they attack the Chiefs, I think you'll see a different approach. You're already seeing more teams. Buffalo especially is going to play a different brand of football than what we've seen from them in the last few years, where they're going to have bigger receivers and more tight end action, and Houston's going to bring a different look with Nico Collins and Diggs down there and Tank Dell. So it'll be interesting to watch. But McDuffie will have a lot of pressure on him, and whoever is playing on the other side will have pressure too.
We're brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. If you've got any kind of problem with your parking lot, don't worry. Gann's been making those problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Don't risk accidents and liability in your lot. Get your parking lot restriped today. A brightly striped lot cuts down on accident, keeps your parking lots as safe as possible. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Does the repeat ride, Sam, on this defense repeating its performance from last year?
I don't think so, just because I don't think, like we mentioned in our last podcast on the offense, I don't think that the offense is going to have as bad a season as it did a year ago. I don't think that the defense is going to be, I think it's going to have to replicate exactly what it did last year, at second in the NFL for them to be if the Chiefs are a top 10 defense, this team will be really, really good. And I still think this defense is top 10 level.
Jeff, what do you think? How good does the defense need to be?
I'm with Sam. If they're a top 10 defense, this team will be a threat to win the championship. But I really believe that the bigger factor than winning a third straight championship is just what they've done the last couple of years, which is being very self-aware. And, if you look back to the first 4 years, there was a lot of hubris in how they played. And they wanted to really dominate you offensively and to do all these things. And so the last couple of years, being willing to find different ways to win, leaning on guys like Pacheco, allowing the defense to take the lead this past year really showed a lot of maturity and a lot of self-awareness of we can't always, you mentioned the last podcast about Mahomes doing too much. They found different ways to win. And so I don't think they have to go into this year saying we got to do what we did last year. I think they have to be open to finding different ways to win, which means that there are going to be some players, maybe like a Jaden Hicks, maybe a Chamari Connor, maybe it's a Mike Danna. I don't think it's going to be Mike Pennell, but, someone's going to have to step up in there and fill some of these voids and make the plays.
Okay. So Mike Pennell will play the role of Nick Bolton this year, it sounds like, in some of our conversations.
He probably covers better than him.
Okay. All right. I'll just let that one go. I don't think they have to be as good as last year to three-peat for all the reasons you guys have stated. I think you're right on all of them. I think the Chiefs have become, and it starts with Patrick Mahomes. I think he's always wanted to be mature. Like I remember, I go back to, I thought it was one of the most, you used the term self-aware, Jeff. I thought that was great because Patrick Mahomes was self-aware when he was on The Shop with LeBron James after his first big year. And they were talking to him and he said, I can't wait to get to where Tom Brady and Peyton Manning are. They just see everything instantly. And I'm not there yet. I'm still learning. And I thought that was a big, here's a guy who's 5,050 MVP. Like he could have been like, I got it all figured out. Right? I think that was Ben Roethlisberger early in his career and why he never really maybe achieved, as great as he potentially could have. I think he sets the tone. And like in the second half against Baltimore, it wasn't going on offense and he leaned on the defense and let it happen. And I think that they know they need more on offense. I think Brett Beach has been self-aware. I think the coaching staff was a little slow to be self-aware last year with the receivers. I think that, and I think the message stuck with their drafting, but defensively, I think it's pretty much all in place, and they just kind of move to where they need to go, make the moves they need to make. I think this is a mature team that understands. I think the big question for this team on the three-peat is, does the three-peat drive them? We had the podcast a couple of weeks ago about, are they distracted, right? Are they all fat and happy? If they're motivated to be the first one to ever win 3 Super Bowls in a row, I think they will give it a great run. I can't say they'll get there because if Mahomes goes down, all bets are off. You never know what's going to happen with injuries. But I think they've got as good a chance. Tom Brady said he doesn't think they're going to win it because winning 3 is so hard. He said winning 1 is tough. Back-to-back is almost impossible. 3, you just can't do it. That's because he never did it. And I'm not saying it's spoiled grapes, but he remembers what it took to win all 3. They don't have to win all 3. They just have to win 1. And so if health isn't a major issue, there's no reason that this team won't be in position to make a good run at it. They're not going to be watching the playoffs on TV. I don't think that's going to be the case. Unless they're fat and happy.
Yeah, that's the inherent problem with saying you want a three-peat is that you already are thinking about what you've done, right? You come into the season with that. You can say what you want about it's a new year, we're starting over, but it's very hard to get to that mentality, which is what you need to win a championship if you're thinking, well, we're making history when we do this. Like that's the big divide they have to conquer is just like, is it, hey, we're trying to win this year, and if we get a three-peat, that's great, or it's we're trying to make history so everybody remembers who we are.
Yeah, I think it's the big question of the season, but I'll tell you just one play in this vein that stuck out to me last week at OTAs. And I realize it's OTAs, but that's kind of part of the point here, which is there was a play where they're just doing 7-on-7 drill. Patrick Mahomes throws a sidearm ball to the back of the end zone. Justin Ross catches it. And so like a lot of the offensive guys are kind of wowing about this play. Drew Tranquill is arguing with Patrick Mahomes that he took too much time. Should have been a coverage sack. And Patrick Mahomes is arguing back with him, well, you dropped everyone in coverage, so I get more time to throw it. And this argument was not a one-sentence back-and-forth argument. Like, it was a lengthy argument. And the reason I bring that up is because I do think those are the kinds of moments you need in the practice to act like every little thing matters. During this time of year, you're going to need that in training camp to act like every moment in training camp matters, because that's the reason you wound up winning back-to-back is because you treat the little things like they were big things. If you're only focused on the big thing and that's all that matters in the end, that's when you become, as you alluded to, Soren, fat and happy. When you concentrate on the little things and treat them like they're all big deals, I think those are the ways you're going to have to avoid it. And there's no question that Mahomes is going to have to be the guy that sets that trend.
I don't know. I like that position. I felt like last year was a mess, and they solved the riddle along the way. I think a lot of those things carry over, right? Like they should be more self-aware, Jeff, to use your phrase, about a lot of things. I think they have a chance to hit the ground running, but you've said it many times and you're 100% right. Every year's a new deal, right? You don't just pick up where you left off, right?
Yep.
You got to start over and build. I do like that there's some roster turnover. I think that was a mistake. And I would listen to any personnel guy who wants to say Chiefs roared into that Super Bowl against the Bucs and just lost all their offensive linemen in the last 2 weeks leading up to it. And that's what killed them. Maybe they would have won back-to-back back then, but I do like that there's some roster turnover. I do think you need some new guys and some guys that are hungry. And I think Drew Tranquill's going for his second, right? I think he's got a different motivation. I think that's good. So we'll see.
Rasheed Rice.
Yes, he is. He's clearly motivated.
Yeah,
Hey, listen, it's a concern. We're going to find out.
Yeah.
We'll find out pretty early when they go up against the Ravens and the Bengals. That's for sure. We're always brought to you by our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's best. If you own a business, if you manage a business, any kind of parking lot issues, Gann's got you covered. They've been solving Kansas City's parking lot problems since 1994. Don't hesitate. Call 816-484-3338. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com. For Jeff Chadiha from NFL.com and NFL Network, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.